The last thing I did before my son Johnny left was hand him his birthday cake. And within minutes, I was already questioning myself. The next 10 hours were messy. They were emotional. I kept replaying everything over in my mind. The argument, what I said, what I didn't say. I knew I couldn't stop him because he was 18. But I couldn't stop thinking, did I handle this wrong? In the last episode, we talked about the first step in the pause plan. Pause to create just a few seconds of space so you don't react and make things worse. Most of the damage happens in those first few seconds, and that's exactly what I tried to prevent the night before. Instead of reacting in the moment, I paused and asked him to do the same. Sleep on it, I said, just one night. But the next morning, he hadn't changed his mind. A friend showed up to get him, and in that moment I had another decision to make. Do I fight for control right now, or do I think about what happens next? Pausing is powerful, but what you do after the pause, that's what determines where this goes. In this episode, we're going to break down the A in the pause plan. Assess. How to look at what's really happening using the simple 10-10-10 tool. What happens in the next 10 seconds, 10 minutes, 10 hours. Do this so you can respond with clarity instead of reacting on impulse. When your adoptive home is filled with chaos, fear, and hard behaviors, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and alone. Hi neighbor, I'm Tim Maudlin, an adoptive dad who's been in the trenches. This is Adoption Struggles and Support, a podcast for adoptive parents facing chaos, fear, and hard behaviors who want a safer, more peaceful home. Here you'll find practical biblical guidance and real-life anchors you can hold on to in the hardest moments. Anchors of hope and healing are on the way. Before we get into today's episode, I want to invite you into a private community I created just for adoptive parents. If you've ever sat in the quiet after a hard day with your adopted child and wondered, am I the only one going through this? You're not. I've been there too. That's why I created this community. It's a place where adoptive parents encourage each other, pray for one another, and share wisdom from the journey. Inside the group, I also post weekly encouragement and resources that I don't share on the podcast. Practical tools to help you navigate the real challenges of adoptive parenting. If you're in a difficult season with your adopted child, you don't have to walk it alone. You can join us right now at timsuggest.com/community. That's timsuggest.com/community. You'll also find the link in the show notes. Come join us, and let's walk this road together, one step, one prayer, one season at a time. So Johnny left with his birthday cake, and just like that, the house was quiet. But inside, not even close. Over the next 10 hours, everything in me wanted to react. I kept asking myself, what happens in the next 10 minutes if I react right now? I might gain control, but I could make things worse. What happens in the next 10 hours? Now we're in a bigger conflict. More words, more damage. And then the harder question, what happens in the next 10 years? Because this wasn't just about him leaving our home. This was about whether anything would actually change or if we just end up right back in the same place again. So instead of reacting, I stayed steady. One of the decisions we made during that time was to keep the lines of communication open. So we kept paying for his phone. Not because we agreed with his decision, but because we cared more about connection than control. It gave us peace of mind, and it made sure he always knew we still cared. One of the hardest parts about that moment was letting Johnny go. I knew he was making a mistake, but I kept coming back to a principle in Scripture from the parable of the prodigal son. The son leaves, and the father lets him go. He doesn't chase him down. He doesn't force him back. But he also doesn't close the door. He stays ready, waiting. Waiting was incredibly hard for me because everything in me wanted to control the outcome. But I realized there was no point. I couldn't force him to come back. So I didn't chase. But I kept the door open, and I made sure he could still reach us. It didn't fix itself overnight. He was gone for months. We tried to reconnect more than once, but the cycle kept repeating. And honestly, it wasn't until about 3 years later that things really started to change. Today we have a relationship, not because I got it right in every moment, but because in that moment I didn't react. I chose to assess, and I made sure our connection stayed open. That's what it looks like. Not perfect, not emotionless, but intentional. Because when you assess, you stop reacting to the moment and you start responding to the future. Let's get to your daily doable. The next time tensions rise with your adopted child, I want to encourage you to pause. Then ask yourself, what happens in the next 10 minutes, 10 hours, or 10 years if I react right now? And as you assess, look for one way to keep the line of communication open, even if you don't agree, and even if it's hard, because that connection might be the very thing that brings them back. Remember, you're not going to be perfect. The situation will not be emotionless, but you can be intentional when you assess. In the last episode, we focused on pausing. In this one, we talked about how to assess what's really happening and thinking beyond the moment. But even that isn't the full picture. Because here's what I started to realize. I wasn't just reacting to what my son was doing. I was reacting to what was happening inside of me. And the same was true for him. In the next episode, we're going to break down the you in the pause plan. Understand. How to recognize what's going on beneath the surface so you don't just manage behavior, you actually understand what's driving it. Because if you don't understand what's underneath the reaction, you'll keep repeating the same cycle no matter how well you pause or assess. That's all for this episode. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, this is Tim, encouraging you to do what you can now. I hope today's episode encouraged you to face the storms in your parenting journey with courage and confidence. If it did, please share this episode with one adoptive parent who might need the same encouragement today. And if you haven't already, a quick review on Apple Podcasts helps more adoptive parents find the show. Until next time, this is Tim, encouraging you to do what you can now.